All right, greetings all. It is 3:31, so I thought we'd get started on our final session today about Intro to ADI. As we're waiting for a few people to get here, there's always a couple minutes where we're logging in and getting things set up. Don't forget Teams, the Teams toolbar. The controls we'll be using is the first one is camera. Love it if you would turn your camera on just so I can see kind of how what you're doing and interacting, and it makes it easy for us to talk. Anytime you do want to talk, all you have to do is click on the mic button and that'll unmute you. Right now, you can do that at any time that you have a question. The other thing to think about as well is if you have any kind of technical problems or you need my attention immediately, hit that raise hand icon. That sends me a big signal as the host so I can see that and I can fix whatever you're having trouble with. And we can use the chat feature if you want to share any ideas with anybody that is in who else is participating, right? So if you want to have an idea to share or a resource or just a comment to make, it's always nice to have the chat full of those kinds of interactions. And then finally, the last piece is the Q&A button here. As always, we're going to be at the end of the session spending some time doing a deeper dive. Or having a time to talk about things deeply, but it always works best if that's kind of centered around your all's questions. So if you have one or something that you want us to spend some time at the end, please hit the Q&A button and put it in there. That way I won't lose it in the chat and I can make sure I can open that and we can go down each of those things one by one as we go through that. So let's get started. Agenda for today wise, I'm planning on talking about a few things here. One is give us a second to talk over last week, thoughts on ADI stages 3 through 5. So we can talk a little bit about that if you watched the recording or if you joined us live and you have some thoughts, questions. Let's talk over that a little bit. Then once that's done, we're going to switch and do the overview of the last two stages, which is stage 6 and 7. Then that's spot for our time for a deeper dive based on how you all are making sense of this. So that's really helpful if you put anything into the Q&A section. Makes that easier for us to kind of structure that discussion. Then I figured I can show you some materials available if this is something that would be helpful for you. I'll show you where to get some things, and then we'll wrap up questions. I'll share my contact information, anything like that if you need that. Okay. So let's go ahead and get started on first part of our agenda, which is really thinking about our ideas about stages 3 through 5. So last week, we talked about the plan stage, the do stage, and the share stage of ADI. And really that's opportunities for kids to design their investigations, carry that out, collect the data they need, make sense of that data, answer the guiding question, and then thinking about then after they've got an answer, how do they go about publicly sharing that with others and getting feedback? And then that's where we start building arguments, sharing and critique those, and then also giving students a chance to revise those. So with that, I'm going to open the floor.
Hi.
Hello. I'm going to open the floor real quick, and if anyone has any thoughts or questions from last week that you would like to chat about, anything like that, I am here to answer those for you. So it's kind of an open floor at this moment. Feel free to unmute your microphone, anything you're thinking about, want to chat about. Make sure everyone has a moment to do that. So it looks like we're feeling pretty good about that. Once again, you can catch the repeat of that recording. Everyone should have a view of that if you don't, or a link to that. If you don't, shoot me an email and I'll make sure I get that to you so you can use that. So I guess with that, let's go into stages 6 and 7. Okay, so when you're thinking about this whole process, it's really this designed, once again, as for us as teachers to kind of think about how this learning experience unfolds for students. And so we organize these kind of activities into these various stages. Actually, what really is helpful is it's a pretty good way to break up these over multiple days as well, right? So I usually think about stage one and stage two getting done with my first 50-minute class, then 3 and 4 in my second. My third class would be stage 5, and then where we move here would be the next class where we can start the period with the reflect stage and then start with the report piece. So that's what we're really going to focus on is these two parts of this is really thinking about the reflect of giving students opportunities to really discuss how they use these different core ideas to make sense of the phenomenon. And then also equally important, how they think about using the various practices that we engage in, whether that's planning investigations or carrying out investigations, making sense of data, or generating arguments, all of those kinds of pieces in there. And then we give kids a chance to get some notes to their future self and then move on to report. So let's dive into the reflect stage here real quick. So as I said, when we're moving through this, you really want to try to do 3 things during this stage. One, you want to give kids an opportunity to discuss the ideas, not so much the answer to the guiding question, but what ideas that they were introduced during the idea stage and how are they using those ideas to make sense of the phenomena? Because really that's what we need the content for students to master. And this gives you a way to make sure that everybody's on the same page and you can correct any misconceptions or help kids kind of problematize an idea or expand on it if need be. After you got that piece, then you have a chance to discuss practices, same kind of idea. How do we make sure that we're designing the best investigations possible, and then giving kids opportunities to write some notes to themselves that help them think through that. So let's go back to the investigation we've been kind of using as a demonstration, which is that releasing of wolves in Big Bend National Park. How is that going to play out with the sheep that are there? So what I would recommend doing for the first part is I like to start the reflect stage on the beginning of a period of a new day. It just is a nice way to kind of bring everybody back in and make sure that everyone's kind of thinking about these ideas again before they move into the intellectual work of kind of sharing. So how I usually do this is I will take a image from the ideas stage or one that's very closely or very similar to that, and then I'll put it up onto the screen. And instead of talking through that and saying this is what this is, I recommend having students talk in their small groups and say, okay, based on what you see up here, everything we've talked about, how would you go about explaining what's happening here? Talk in your groups for a second, then I can call on each group, they kind of share, and then you can get them adding ideas to each other. And it's really a good way for you to see if they're using these important ideas or not. So that's kind of the big piece on that. Then after you are happy how they're talking about those ideas, then you can move into the practice discussion, which I usually only use 3 questions, pretty much the same ones each time. Then I've got different ones for kind of elementary range, middle school range, and high school range. This one is for the high school, so because of the high school example, right? So first thing I might put is this question up on the board is, what things you do as you carried out your investigation to increase your confidence in the quality of the evidence you relied on, right? Because really that's what we're getting down to in science is how do we know kids will ask if I'm right or not? That really comes down to how strong the evidence is for something. And there's lots of things that go into generating strong evidence and having confidence in evidence. And there's things you can do during your investigation to increase your confidence in that. So have each group talk that over, then share out. This is usually where I give a lot of compliments. Yes, that's fantastic. You did multiple trials. That's fantastic. You took multiple measurements and average. That's a great method as well. So all of these kinds of things of what went well. Second thing then is then ask them what didn't go so well. What if we were going to start this investigation today, knowing everything you know now? What would you have done differently to improve the quality of your evidence? And this is where they really start thinking about, well, another group might say, well, we would have done more trials, or we really didn't do enough to write down information. We just kind of sketched the graph instead of actually getting points, which made it really hard for us to do an analysis later. So all of these kind of reflective things on their mistakes. And then the last question then becomes, as then when I usually frame this, is you're going to be doing another investigation here in a few weeks. I'm going to ask you to design your own. I'm going to ask you to generate arguments again. What can you do in the future to carry out plan and carry out the best investigations possible, right? Set some goals for yourself. And after they come up with those reasons, you can jot them down the board, you can reach consensus. Each group can come up with their own reasons. It really doesn't matter how you do that. The important thing is their goal setting. Then at the end of your reflective discussion, which I would say for each part, about 10 minutes on each of those, right? So about 10 minutes on the ideas, 10 minutes on the discussion of the practices, then give them about 5 minutes to say, okay, you need to future you is going to be doing this work again, right? So you're going to be using these ideas, maybe a test is coming up. What is it about the content you want to make sure you remember, or that was new to you now that you want to keep a record of? Same thing for the practices. If we're going to be doing another investigation, what are you going to need to remember to do next time? Then they write these notes to themselves, and it becomes a record that they can you can pull back, have them study from, or review before moving on to their next investigation. So in about 25 minutes, you can get this really rich, deep conversation going on in terms of helping students really think about what they've learned and how they're going to use that information moving forward. So before opening up for questions, what I wanted to give you is kind of some keys that I've been working on for the number of years of trying to lead these conversations. As we all know, it can be very difficult getting students to talk. It's also very difficult to make sure that everybody is kind of focusing on the discussion points at hand. And there's some ways that you can do that will increase the likelihood of this 25 total minute discussion is going to work really well. So I want to share those with you real quickly. Hopefully that's helpful to you all. So first key is, when you're setting up these talks during the reflective discussion, you want to start off by introducing some uncertainty, things that we're not familiar with, right? Or things that we're not sure about that is worth discussing. So let me show you two pictures here. So in this investigation, I may have chosen to show them the trophic levels pyramid image, okay? So the one on the left that is the one that's in the actual handout that has all of this information on it. What really works really well is if you remove that information but just the bare bones. And that encourages them to really think about, okay, what am I seeing here? What does this mean? Why is this shaped as a pyramid? And they can have a reason to start using their ideas to explain what's happening, right? If you give them the one on the left, they're just going to repeat, well, there's energy transfer, there's the biomass, like whatever that is. And it ends up being like a quiet note-taking session as they kind of scramble that down. And what you really want them to do is start saying, tell me what's missing, what's filling in the blanks. What are we unsure about? How would you explain that? Okay. The second key is that if you are going to make sure that you have uncertainty, you're going to have them do some discussion, make sure students have some resources to pull from. So if you're having this discussion going, you can make sure they have their packets, their idea stage, their arguments they wrote down, anything in there so they can kind of reference that information as they're talking. Another trick you can do is that image that you're using for the discussion of the content. You can give each student a quick little handout, like a half piece of paper with the same picture before you flash it on, kind of like a bell ringer, and say, okay, and just have the question, what would you add to this? And have them start writing things down. And then they can talk about that when the image is shown up there, and they have then resources to pull from, and it's not on the spot on that. So it's always kind of helpful. I have found to make sure that they have things that they can reference, point at, look up during these kinds of discussions. The third key is I would highly recommend not having kids work on their own during these discussions and having kids kind of in row. So I would really highly recommend you put them into, bundle them up into groups of four. I'll explain why it's four in a second, but four seems to be the magic number for these discussions. Because when you set them into that groups of four, you can start off by doing this small group share out routine. Okay. And how that ends up working is when I flash the picture up there on there or the discussion question, then I can use this routine as a teacher to get them talking. And I'll tell you a different one after this too. So I'll call this routine A, of the small group share out. So I'll start out like, what do you think is going on in that picture? Okay, I'm going to give you all 3 minutes to talk about this question in your groups. Okay, go ahead and talk. So they talk in their groups of four for about 3 minutes, and then they may be color coded team one, team two, or orange team or blue team. Hey, orange team, what'd you all talk about? Great. Blue team, what do you have to add? What do you have to add? Oh, that's really interesting. Why might it be important to consider that point that blue team brought up? I'm going to give you another 3 minutes to talk about this and then be ready to share out. So you're constantly going from like this small groups of generating ideas to individuals sharing out. When you're first starting with this, you can also be a little bit more scripted in this and kind of take the option of not it, like when you're asking a group to share, making sure that students know that they're going to be responsible for sharing for their group is a second routine you can use with this. So say you have your different teams of four, you can give them a color and then number each student. So like orange team, your person 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then you can say, okay, it sounds like we can take some time to talk in our small groups. I'm going to give you 3 minutes. Twos, I'm going to ask you to share out a partner group. So be ready. Give them some minute to talk. Okay, orange 2, what'd you talk about? Great. Blue 2, what'd you talk about? Red 2, what'd you talk about? And your discussion gets going much faster like that versus the kind of sit and wait for things to come up. Kind of like earlier in the session where I just kind of gave you an open floor and said, hey, anyone have anything to talk about, right? That's what happens in classrooms. We don't get a lot of people voicing ideas unless they've had a chance to talk about it, share out, and they know that they're going to need to be able to share it. Fifth key point is you need a routine for when it goes silent, because it will. People might be struggling or just feel uncomfortable sharing. So you need to have a routine for when it goes silent. A second reason that I really like the groups of four is you can use a change of format routine if you have in groups of four. How that works is like this. So say I've got them in groups of four and I just did the small group share out and it's really quiet. No one wants to say anything or voice anything. When that happens, instead of just sitting there uncomfortably or diving in and explaining to them, I can just say something like this. Okay, it sounds like we could use some time to talk one-on-one. I'm going to give you all 3 minutes to talk in partners. 1s and 3s partner up, 2s and 4s partner up in your groups, right? So you've got from 4 now down to 2. You give them 3 minutes in that, and then you say, okay, 1s and 3s in each group, share what you talked about with 2s and 4s. Great. 2s and 4s now share with 1s and 3s. Okay. Now, as a whole group, decide what was the most useful idea, and I'm going to have 3s share out. Give them another 30 seconds, and then, okay, orange 3, what'd you say? Blue 3, what did you say? And by having this change of format routine, you can get a conversation unstuck. And it's really helpful than kind of doing the waiting game of who's going to break first and say something. The sixth key point, and probably these are all equally important, but this one I've really found is pretty critical, is when you're leading these discussions, you really want to do your best to reward interactions that foster collaboration and taking up of other people's ideas, instead of students competing to be first or to be the correct at the expense of others. So what I mean by that is thinking about kind of classroom norms of, hopefully our class is, we're trying to build a community where people are respectful and inclusive and supportive of each other. So you have to do your best to reward those kinds of interactions through your feedback that you're giving students. So when they share something, it's not right or wrong. It's, Hey, that's really interesting. Thank you so much for telling me about that. Could you tell us more? I'd like to know more what you're thinking. Hey, I love how you all invited someone to contribute in your group. That is super helpful, right? It always is nice when you don't feel comfortable to have someone ask you a question. Hey, were there any other ideas mentioned in your group that we haven't heard yet, right? So you're trying to reward these collaborative interactions through positive feedback. And it's amazing how the class starts from really talking more and helping each other out, and you're not doing all of the heavy lift for this, and they're become much more willing to share their ideas. So if you break those 6 key points, you can kind of think about it in terms of design of like what are you setting up in terms of your reflective discussion, and then how you go about facilitating it, right? So on the design side, you want to really focus on making things intrinsically motivating, right? So you create a need to talk, right? So introducing certainty like an image or something like going that, and ensure that they have resources to pull from, right? So these ideas that not necessarily the right answer, but things they've written down in the past, things they can look up. Then when you're facilitating, you want to focus more on the extrinsic kinds of motivation, right? So you put them in groups of 4 to ease the tension. So it's not individual ideas, it's team ideas. You use the small group share out routine. You have a routine for when you hear crickets, and then you reward those desired interactions. And by doing those kinds of things, you get much, much better conversations happening. So that's kind of the overview of the reflect stage. I'm going to stop here for a second and give you all a chance to kind of ask any questions before we go into kind of deeper dives. Any thoughts or questions what I just shared there with you on the reflect stage?
I just was like looking at stuff today. I stumbled across something. I have used HHMI before. Most of the science teachers probably have some idea what HHMI is, but there was also somebody in there who had created a lesson plan using argument, like driven inquiry, and then linked it to an already existing set of data and videos and things in there. So if you are a math teacher or somebody, you might want to do a search to see if somebody has already worked on some version of a lesson. Because I feel comfortable adapting this eventually, but I know there's going to be some roughness.
Oh,
But
sure.
developing questions and a guide of like unless we get some cards with supplies, but developing a list of in questions, to help facilitate those quiet moments.
Oh, yeah.
And that person had some of that, but if you already use some sort of lesson adapting it to this, if you already use some sort of data, or you have an idea, what kind of data can you find on this idea that you can then adapt this? So
Love it. Great points. Anybody else? Thoughts, questions?
Yeah, I appreciate all the strategies that you outlined for getting kids to engage in discussion. I mean, that's difficult. And I think you kind of have to be comfortable with the awkward silence a little bit as an instructor and just give them time and
Mhm.
like be positive about it and just acknowledge that it might, I think moving around the room while it's happening and planting seeds too, like you hear them someone in a group making a good point, and then you just kind of prep them and say, hey, will you make sure that your group shares that when we bring it together in a group discussion, that kind of stuff.
Love it. Yeah, that's a really good one. I saw great teacher walked around with like just a little 3x5 card, right? And then would just make notes to themselves about really good ideas. So they use that strategy for the cricket time of so oh hey child one, right? You had a really great idea. Like I heard you talking about it. Would you like to mention that kind of thing? And it was really cool to be able to see like a routine like that of what, like planting, having those ideas, knowing what's out there, making sure you can run a discussion like that. It takes practice and yeah, and you got to just keep at it. Kids get really good at it once they get comfortable. Any other thoughts, questions? If one does come up, don't forget about the Q&A. Just hit that little button, add that in there, and we'll return to this during the deeper dive that we'll do after talking about the report stage. So last stage of ADI is, we call it report. And the idea behind this is to give students both a reason to learn how to write in science, and also give them at the same time giving them an opportunity to write to learn, right? So this idea that you're both learning about communication, but by communicating information, it forces you to think about it deeper. So a lot of the stuff that was happening in the earlier stages have kind of been all small group or whole class, right? So task stage, we kind of introduced everything as a whole class, but we started breaking into small groups. And then ideas, plan, do, and share was all kind of small group. Then reflect, we moved it back into whole class. And then report is designed to give students an opportunity to really start thinking about, okay, what did I learn? How do I know what I learned? How do I best communicate this? And getting them to really start kind of internalizing all of these ideas that have been kind of bouncing around the classroom at any given time. So you've got 3 activities in this stage. One is you ask students to create a report. I'll show you what these reports look like. It's not designed to be the 30-page long term paper or crazy AP version of a report. It's pretty simple. I'll show you what it ends up looking like, but it's designed to kind of mimic more of what happens in academic articles, but keeping the page numbers down. And then they actually then go through a peer review process. I'll explain how that looks, and then they have a chance to use that feedback and what they discuss to do a final revision. So here's what a report looks like. So what I usually try to do is, especially when I'm first teaching kids about this, I will use these sentence starters. And the report is really only kind of 3 pieces. One is, call it the introduction, which is what were you trying to figure out and why, right? So like, give us a context for somebody that was not here. What have we been studying? What have we noticed when we watched those phenomenon videos? And then what was our goal of the investigation, right? Like, what were we trying to figure out and what was our question? So that comes right off kind of the task stage that we did before. Then from there is their method of, okay, how'd you go about answering your question? Like, if this was your question, what did you go about doing? What did you test? Why did you test it that way? What were you trying to do? And then finally, they have their argument section, which really corresponds to the results and discussion of a typical academic paper. So tell us what you figured out, your answer to that question, your explanation, and then your evidence and your justification of that. And what they do then is take what they co-created on a whiteboard and then turn that into written text, where they're using multiple modes of graphs or images, as well as writing to kind of share their ideas. So your hope at this point is, I usually find where this works the best is after you do reflective discussion, that 25 minutes or 30 minutes, ideas are fresh. Then you take the rest of the 50-minute period class to give students an opportunity to write their report. And it's designed not to be a long thing. So most of the time this takes about 20 minutes total for a kid to write up this, because if they're really kind of thinking about what's important to share and not all the extra, but really getting it down to, this is what we're trying to figure out, this is what we're doing. Even during some of the first times, what I'll do is just say, hey, we're going to write the introduction together. And we write the introduction, we start on it, not the same thing, but writing in the same room together. And I can give them a little feedback or give them little pep talks of like, just think about this or add this piece, or you can look at this here. And then as they move through, great, now let's do the method together and working together. And you can get that done by the end of the period, right? So it's not designed to be a term paper or anything like that, but it's really designed to get them to think about the content and how they know what they know. So then we go into the process of peer review. So I try to make a model of this to kind of illustrate what I'm saying, and because there's some logistics to make this work well. So this is my class of 30 students, right? I didn't add seats or anything, but they're all sitting at their desks. And over here on the right, I have a table, just a long table that I can stick stuff. This might be your lab stations or whatever it is. So what I do is the next day, because at the end of the class period, they all should have a report done. If they want to take home and finish up writing, that can be fine too. But at the beginning of the period of the next day, I collect everybody's report. So right now I've got 30 copies of this one piece of paper each, right? That's why we keep it at one piece of paper, because it doesn't need to be long, and B, it makes organization a lot easier, right? So I've taken this piece of paper from every student. So I've got 30 draft reports. I go stick them on a table. I usually tell students, don't put your names on this, just make a mark that you can tell it's yours. A couple stars, circle, a picture, however you want to identify your own work from. But we're going to have other people have a chance to review it. So I've got these 30 things. Then what you want to do is put the students into groups of 3. So like we were in groups of 4 for other discussions, or you might have been groups of 4 for the investigation part. However you want to do that, you want them in groups of 3. Call them their peer review groups or whatever. They don't have to be in the same groups they were in, just groups of 3, right? So now I've got 10 groups of 3. I've got my 30 papers over to the side. I take my first 10 papers and I give 1 to each group. Okay, so each group gets 1 of these reports. The other 20 stay over on the side for right now. They each get 1 report, and it's written by somebody that's not in their group, right? So no one's looking at their own paper at this point. Then I give each group 1 peer review guide. The peer review guide looks like this. It's divided into 4 sections. So 1 is really looking at the introduction. The second is looking at the method. The third is looking at the argument they wrote, and then 4th is their overall mechanics, right? So how was the actual writing? And I'm going to blow this up for you a little bit. So this is the section that looks at the argument part. And what it's done is it's framed as not really as a things that you must have, but questions for the reviewers to answer. So as a team, what they want to do is they want to read through that report together, and then they're going to answer these questions as a team, right? So the first one on this part, does the claim they gave answer the guiding question? And then they've got a column, they've got 3 columns there for no, somewhat, or yes as their reviewer rating. If they think it's perfect, mark yes. If it's missing, mark no. And if there's something that needs to improve, mark somewhat. Anything that's marked somewhat, they need to go down to where it says reviewers, please explain how the author can improve that, and tell them what to fix, right? So they've already identified a weakness by saying somewhat. Now tell them how to fix it based on what you're saying. What would you do differently? And so they go down each of these questions. Is the analysis data correct? They have to make that decision. Is the interpretation of the analysis make sense? Is there enough evidence? And what you end up getting is these really rich conversations in these groups about, well, I think it's right. No, that's not there. And then they start discussing, well, how do we know the analysis is right or not right? Or is there enough evidence? Would you like to see more? And that discussion then helps kids really start to realize what counts and what's the standard that we're looking for. Because sometimes they'll look at that and say, oh my God, that's really perfect. I love how that looks. And then they're going to remember how that looked. Other ones, they're going to say, oh, that just doesn't make any sense. And then they have to explain why it doesn't make any sense. And then you're going to start hearing this, oh, right? When they realize they're critiquing somebody else for the exact same thing they did in their own report, right? So they start connecting these dots of, oh, that's what we mean by this, or this is a good way of saying this, okay? So What I usually do is I elect one student as the recorder. I'll just hand that to the peer review guide to one student, and I give them 15 minutes to review this report. So as a team of 3, you get 15 minutes. You've got one person recording, read the report, fill it out, give them advice. At the end of the 15 minutes, I take all of those reports back. So those now have been reviewed. So they got the report. I put the peer review guide below the report, so it's beneath that, so somebody can see their own paper, right? Whose paper that was, but the peer review guide's underneath. Then I take the next 10, pass those out to each student. I have a new student be the recorder. So they then have another 15 minutes to go through this new paper. Once again, it's not any of their own from their group, but they have a new recorder. They ask the questions, they fill it out. At the end of 15 minutes, time's up, take those back. We now have 20 reviewed, 10 left to do. Each group gets the last 10. Last person in the group is now the recorder, and they review. And then at the end of the 15 minutes, they're all finished. So in 45 minutes, you have, which is about a class period, you've had all 30 reports reviewed by a group of 3. Each group of 3 has reviewed 3 reports, and each person in the group of 3 has been a recorder and giving the feedback to other people. So it's not just one person taking all of the notes. Okay. Then you can break your students back up into their original seats, right? So now they're sitting back on their own. They all get their own papers back, right? And what I usually do is say, come up to your table on your way back and grab your paper with your peer review guide, give them a chance to look over the feedback they've got. And then what they can do is you ask them to revise it and do a final. They can rewrite it by hand. You can have them type it, however you want to have that final version come to you. But my biggest suggestion is have them give you your first draft, the one that got reviewed, their final draft, and this peer review guide all stapled together. Then what you're able to do is take the peer review guide, now use it as a rubric, and assign a numerical score to each of these categories. And where it says teacher score on the right, you can go down that, and then you can read over their final draft and give them a score. What I would recommend at this point too is you really don't want to give a lot of feedback. You're just kind of doing the final evaluation of this because they've already had feedback. And to be honest, they will not look at your feedback if you give it a score. So we're trying to push the feedback earlier to a time when they're going to use it. So I can usually, when I'm grading these, it takes me about 3 or 4 minutes per. I just read it real quick, and then I can remember what they said, and I can go down each line, give them the score. If I can't remember something, I can just look real quick. So it's designed to speed up grading for us and keep the mental work and the cognitive lifting on students in order to improve. There's a spot there where you can write your teacher comments and then total it. One thing that we've set up on this rubric is kind of dealing with the grades versus assessment issue. So I think of assessment as anytime you are making thinking visible, which is what this is, then grades is usually what we do to put into the grade book to assign evaluation to it. Unfortunately, the way most of our grade books are set up is that students have to score perfectly on everything to get full credit, right? So everything they do wrong is a knock against them, which makes kids really not want to try anything new or anything like that. So what we've done here with this is we've made the rubric on each of those criterion. There's a 0, 1, 2, and 3. So the 0 means missing. 1 means meets improvement, 2 is meets standard, and 3 means goes above and beyond. It wowed me, right? Exceeds expectations. And then if you look at the number on the bottom, it's out of 38. So really what you're doing is assuming that a perfect paper is everybody got a 2 on everything. So what's nice about that is as you're going down, a student gets a 1 on something, but maybe they did fantastic on something else. You can still get 100% on the paper instead of losing points all the time, right? It also builds in a nice mechanism for later if they're asking at the end of the semester how I can get my grade up. Why don't you go back and look at some of your reports and revise those? I bet there's some more points that you can work on that. So it's tied directly into improvement and gives them a mechanism to do that. That's just how I like doing these on these things so you can make it out of 38 or make it out of 2. However you want to do it, it's just set up that way so you can modify any way you want. But that's kind of the reasoning behind that. And like I said, you can have them write their final report back on sentence starters or have them on a new sheet of paper that's blank, or you can type it however you want to do it, but have all of that stuff come in together so you have a record and can see what they've done. Okay. So that's the report stage in a nutshell. Yeah, so any questions or thoughts at this point of time about that stage specifically? I'll open the floor up for you all.
I really like the idea of allowing those points to be it's for improvement and not having it completely, like it's 100 or it's less. You've got that flexibility. That's really, really nice. Sorry, my camera's not working. I've had
no problem.
technical difficulties today. So
Oh, no problem. Like technology is great until it doesn't do what it's supposed to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean that it is actually pretty cool when you see students seeing that system, right? Because usually, I mean, I see it all the way up in the college courses that I'm teaching now. Like students do not want to take a chance on anything because missing any point just makes their grade go down, right? And there's really no way to bring it up ever, right? So if you have a mechanism where you can actually meeting expectations means you've 100% great, you've done it, but there's also wiggle room that you can do more and really wow us, and then you get more points for that. Great, that can help improve their grades overall instead of giving them alternative assignments or having to drop assignments or any number of things to make the grade book math work the way we need it to work. Any other thoughts, comments?
I guess I'm a big fan of having students peer edit, peer review. How do you address their kind of hesitance to, they just kind of want to give everybody a participation award, like, hey, you did it, so let's give you all 4s, and they don't get into the meat of it. I'm sure there's a process but how do you address that?
Yeah. So a couple things. So one, having them reviewing groups is really key to this, right? So when we first started testing this in classroom, the first idea was, hey, switch with a partner and give each other feedback. Epic fail, worst thing we've ever done. Exactly for that reason, everyone just went down and said, great, 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 and didn't even read it, right? So now you're decreasing that chance of having an entire group just going great, 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 great. And it's easy actually to catch that if it does happen. So like, since I've got it, instead of 30 kids all working on something at the same time, now I only have 10 groups. So if all of a sudden I'm moving around while they're working on this and watching what they're doing and listening to their discussion, if a group gets done in 3 minutes, basically you can go over there and say, really, so that was an absolutely perfect paper. There is nothing that you've had feedback. Well, no, there were some things. Well, how would you feel if you were getting feedback and no one put any effort and gave you some advice to that, and that, like, this is your chance to get a great grade. Don't they deserve the same help that you would want to have? Yes, Mr. Sampson. And then that tends to help a lot with that. But that by having them review in groups, one paper at a time, do not give them all 3, give them one at a time. You can track and see based on how long what they're talking about or what they're doing, you can intervene pretty quickly and catch it before it happens.
Thank you. Yeah, that makes sense. Less, yeah. And then, I mean, your sense is you're making them anonymous, which is, I get that. That makes good sense. Is it really anonymous, or do they kind of know?
It's as anonymous as we can get it, right? So at the elementary grades, we don't even make them anonymous anymore because they all know each other's writing. They're together too much, right? In the upper grades, they try to figure it out sometimes. but once again, if it over time, as they start doing this, they start seeing the value in it and it becomes a helpful thing, less than a I gotcha thing, because they are bad or good. They are used to grading other people's work, right? There's lots of classrooms where they'll just go in and say, here's the answer key, and they'll go down and grade other people's work to lessen workloads, right? So they're kind of used to seeing that. They're not used to helping each other, right? And I think that's the biggest the first part. I think, and Dina said this, your first few are not going to be perfect with this, because the kids are not, what is this thing? Why are you asking me to do this? Why should I give feedback, until they realize how helpful it is. So yeah, there's a little bit of them trying to figure that out. But most of the time, like when I guest teach, like if they're handwriting by things, they're not usually looking at each other's handwriting. I mix them up enough, and then they put just a symbol on top instead of their like ID number, because they start sharing those things. That usually does it. Every once in a while comes up, and then it's just kind of like, okay, keep that to yourself. We're here to help and not to penalize, right?
Makes sense. Thank you.
Mhm.
I appreciate the question and your comments. Today we did an activity where we were examining each other's work, and we didn't get to the meat of it because everything was great, great, great. You know, everybody's work was great.
Perfect,
So
right?
with the comments that you were making, it'll help me to kind of change my technique as I approach it with them.
Awesome. Love it. And I think part of it too, the thing is, if you're changing some techniques like that, when you're giving them a review guide, try not to make your review guide too specific for things to look at, right? So that's you doing the work. That in some ways that's you doing the work, and then everybody's paper looks exactly the same because they're just following the rubric. That's what, like, one of the blasts on rubrics overall in the education system is becomes everyone gives you the exact same thing, right? So by having them open questions like that, of like, do you think there's enough evidence, right? They have to have that discussion of, well, what counts as enough evidence, right? And what I've found over the years is when you crouch it that way, kids are actually a lot more strict than I would be. Like I usually give them the benefit of the doubt and say, oh, that's a great try, right? But they're like, no, 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 you got to have this and this, and they start developing these lens for quality, and the entire classroom gets better as they do this by just having these open discussions. Plus, you can use the exact same rubric on every one of these investigations, this peer review guide, because it's worded so they're always going to be supplying evidence, but what counts as good evidence is what varies by investigation. So they got to get used to thinking about what makes evidence strong or weak, and then applying it in different contexts. So the criteria never change, right? What's valued in scientific communication, it's is this instant a good example of what we value, is what we end up building in there. And then it makes them really critical thinkers, right? So they're deciding how this should look, if it's enough, should I believe it or not? Any other questions, thoughts? All right, let's go deeper dive then, right? And in past sessions, I have kind of had something to go deeper dive on this. When I was putting this one together here, I kind of gave you my best two tidbits in terms of peer review, of how to set that up and how to get conversations going. So I really kind of want to turn this over and have the time to get everybody a chance to share. What are you thinking about now in terms of investigations as a whole, all 7 stages of ADI, or like these last two? How are you attempting to make sense of this? How does it fit with what you're currently doing? Where you want to go? How is this meeting your goals that we talked about on the very first day? Thoughts and concerns you would like to share. So I'm giving you what I'll do is I'll just kind of run down the meeting names and give you a chance to speak. So I'm going to give you like 15 seconds to collect your thoughts. But then I'll kind of give everybody kind of an open or a time to share. All right, let's do this. Courtney, I'm going to put you on the spot here. What are you thinking about? How are you trying to make sense of all this? Any thoughts, concerns you have? This stuff specific in general, what we've been talking about?
I really like having them write. Like I feel like they need a lot more of that now. My thinking is the grading because I still have 150 something kids. So I'm thinking like, oh my God, 4 minutes a kid plus times the 150, like that'll take me forever.
Yep.
So in my head, I'm trying to like, can I do this as a group? Can I do like group reports? And then I'm also trying to figure out how long would peer review take? So how many days would it be for them to make their draft and then peer review and then rewrite it and then me grade all of it? Like I'm trying to figure out that timeline.
Perfect. Okay, these are great questions. Thank you. So big thing on the peer review. So what's nice about this is, like I said, like about 4 minutes, because what takes you the most time is giving feedback. So if you're just going through and rating things, that keeps it at 4 minutes. But very true point. 4 minutes, 150, that adds up, right? But the idea behind this is that when the assessment and grading are two different things, right? So like as they're moving through this investigation, which is a multiple day investigation, you're assessing them as you go because you're watching them, you're giving them feedback on their design of their investigation, what they did with their whiteboards, when they made their arguments. You're giving them feedback on their reflective discussion and all those comments. So you're kind of assessing as that you go in a formative way where you can give them feedback, or educative way where you can give them feedback, or formative, you can bring something up in later. But because this is a multiple day things, you're not grading every day, right? So you don't have to take any of this stuff and score it. So like say you started this on a Monday, you've got you do stage 1 and 2 on Monday, which is through the ideas. On Tuesday, you've got I'm blanking, plan and do. So they've collected data and they got to answer the question on Tuesday. Wednesday, you have them do their argumentation sessions, which is the share stage. That takes an entire period. Thursday, you start your peer review on that, or you start your reflective discussion, and then you give them the rest of the period to write their first draft. So that's Thursday. Friday, then you have the peer review process, right? So that takes 45 minutes to answer that other question. Is between the writing and the peer review, you're looking at about, what's that, 45, 60, about 70 minutes on that between those two. So you can get those done in 2 days. And then either on Monday, you can give them the first 20 minutes of class to write that up, or you can assign that as homework, depending on your context and your views on homework. But that's your two options. Now, what I think is exciting about this is what I think it gets buried, what kills me in terms of grading is when I have to do it every single day. So basically on this, instead of doing 160 students every day with a piece of paper that I have to grade in some way, now I am doing grading once a week for 150 students for 4 students. So, or for 4 minutes. So I think it buys you more overall amount of grading goes down versus having to do it every day. Now that's assuming you assign something every day for grade that you put in the grade book. That may not be the case, but that's just kind of how I think about it in there. One of the reasons I got through grad school is teaching this way. I didn't have as much grading to do anymore because I was able to help kids just by interacting with them. And then I had one product that looked really good that was pretty easy to grade, that got into the grade books. If that makes sense.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Jessica, what are you thinking?
Oh, hey, can I piggyback on?
Oh, please. Who's I?
This is Sean.
Oh, hey, Sean.
I used the raise hand thing, but no big deal.
Oh, sorry.
So I've I hear what Courtney's saying. Yeah, I mean, I've done that exact math calculation. You know, you're like 5 minutes a kid, 150 kids, that's 750 minutes or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So I think you had a great suggestion, Victor, but I'd like to add something.
Please.
So, and just maybe you can help me think this through. So the kids, they write like a rough draft, right? And is that a period basically?
Basically. Well, the
Yeah.
rough draft takes about 25 minutes. So
Okay.
I piggyback that on the reflective discussion. So I do both of those in a period.
Okay, and then they get their feedback and then they write a final draft.
Yep.
And how long do they spend writing the final draft?
20, 15 minutes.
Okay, so what I would do to help with the grading is I would have like a roster with all their names on it, or you know, some version of this grade sheet where I can see all my students at the same time. And you can almost like pre-grade some of them. You know, you're walking around and like you're seeing what they're writing, and you know that they're meeting those standards. They're hitting, you know, like you saw them write a 4 on that rubric.
Yep.
So you can just check that off. You know, like you're almost getting some of them done in advance, so that when you get their paper with, you know, and you're going to do your teacher marks, you don't have to read what they wrote really, because you've already read it while they were writing it, and you know what they got, you know.
Mhm.
So that saves a lot. Like that's my favorite kind of assignment, when the kids turn in their work and I already know what the grade is. You know, I'm just basically putting grades in the grade book at that point.
Perfect.
And then the other thing I would say is a lot of times I'll, you know, collect the final draft, and then I will go through and pull some exemplars out. And I don't know if this fits in with your model, but you know, if you have like an, you know, one that's exemplary or mastery level, one that's kind of in the middle, you know, proficient or near proficient, and then one that needs a lot of improvement, you know, I would then show those to students, you know, obviously anonymously, and talk about what makes this one. And it's, you're kind of, you've got that built in already, but sometimes kids, like, I don't know, my students anyways, I can only speak from that, you know, like until they turn it in, I know they're not, you know, if you give it back to them and say, look, you guys can do better, you know, like I don't want to spend 750 minutes of my time grading these, giving you grades that you don't actually want.
Yep.
So let's take one more look at this. Here's a really good one. What makes it good? Here's one that needs a lot of them, and then give them one more shot. And then that way, when they turn them in, like they're as polished as they can possibly be.
Yeah. And then the closer you get them to being perfect, the faster your grading goes, right? So like the hardest part about grading is the ones that need the most help, right? Like that's
Exactly.
always the thing. If they get 100% on it, it takes, yeah. So when I say 5 minutes, like realistically, you're skimming, right? And if it's good, 1 minute, right? Like how fast we can do these things. It's always, I couldn't agree with you more. That's the problem, is the work that's not up to par is what takes forever. And my big aha, just to add on to this, what you're saying, my big aha was before I started advocating for this peer review, I always cared about kids writing. So what I would do is have them just a report, but I wouldn't have them review each other. So I would just take them, and you know, I would take them on Friday or whatever like that. And so then I would go to a coffee shop to grade, because I didn't like grading at all. And I would do anything, like mow the lawn, laundry, anything. So at least if I was at a coffee shop, I couldn't go home until this was done. But I would sit there and pore over these things, and some of the writing was horrendous. So what I would do is start trying to rewrite it for them. And after 150, 160 of those, 8-hour day, 9-hour day. And the hardest thing is that I slapped a grade on it, and I brought it back and passed it out. And the kids that I poured all my blood, sweat, and tears over, never even looked at the paper because the grade was on it, right? And they're like, that's guess what I get. And then I had a bunch of kids that like missed two and were yelling at me how I didn't see their brilliance of their writing. They're already writing fine, right? So like I couldn't agree with you more. The more that you can push it to them of having to think and refine and make it better before it gets to you, it's a win-win for everybody, right? They're doing the cognitive thinking, the cognitive load of all of this and learning, and you are then decreasing your amount of time that you got to spend on stuff. Win-win. Cool. Okay, so let's go. Where were we? Jessica, what do you got? What are you thinking about?
I'm just trying to make sure I've got these last two down pretty well because I missed the second session. There was something wrong with my link and I couldn't get in. So I missed that whole thing and I haven't been able to rewatch it. So I'm just trying to pick these last two sections up as well as I can before I go back and try to do that.
Cool. Love it. Jeffrey, how are you doing?
I'm doing okay. The previous person who asked a question kind of asked my question about the grading and the time constraints. And I do like the way you do the peer editing with the groups and the sort of rotations. I do like that because I want to have some sort of honest feedback from the kids. And if I just have them trade papers, you're right. I've gotten the, oh, everyone's doing great, great, you know, just
Yep.
to sort of save face and finish up early, you know.
Yep. No, it's a pretty slick system and it works pretty well.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. Devon, what do you got?
So I'm the teacher that puts a grade in every day. But because I'm crazy and I do it to myself, but that's beside the point. So
That's a lot of hours.
well, so I do it. I grade while they turn it in. Basically, it's a
Okay.
whole thing. I really refined my they work, I work situation. Anyways, so my kids know that I am a grade everyday person. I'm not a grade once a week person, and they really like that about me. And I don't know that I could go to the one grade a week person as much as I would try. So in doing this process, is there like pieces where you could say, okay, like I'm going to grade this part of this process and that's going to be a grade and your report's a grade. That way there's like a check for me, like, and they're getting that at least 2 grade a week situation
Sure.
to satisfy my everyday grade.
Oh,
Personality.
sure. Yeah. So like, there's no hard and fast rules. I think that like this comes to like what do you want your classroom to look like? And so the way you would go about doing that is so we've got each stage of ADI, there is a work product that they build or create, right? So if you're thinking about the task stage, they do initial models, right? And they come up with some initial questions. If you think about the idea stage, they're writing the most useful ideas from the readings. If you're talking about the plan stage, they've got a plan they put together. So you can collect each one of those and give them a grade on each piece as you're going through. That's all. There is a student work product for each thing they do as you go through that. You can just collect those and add grades to them or give them feedback there as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Let's see. Sandra, you've asked a question or made a comment or raised or anything else you want to share?
You mentioned in the reflect stage, discuss ideas, not just answers. Discuss the practices. And I still have a little trouble reaching my kids, engaging them in that area. They just want to get to an answer and okay, they're done. So if you could give me just a little bit more on pulling the meat from them.
Sure. So the way we design these ADI investigations, the best way to think about it is the answer to the guiding question is really not what's important about them. It's the kind of their justification that they use of these ideas that come from that part of the handout. So when I make these, I I write those ideas sections so they're designed to address the core ideas and the cross-cutting concepts, or if you're in Texas, recurring themes of the standards, right? So that's really what that I want them to be talking about. Because when I first started doing inquiry-based things, the answer they came up with to the guiding question was the standard, right? Now, by moving that to you're using these ideas to make sense of something else, I don't have to focus if they came up with the right answer. Now I need to know if they're thinking about how they're using the ideas correctly or not, which makes it easier to do that discussion, because then I don't have to say, what did you get for the guiding question? And everybody's saying the same thing. I can now put a graphic up from those ideas. Like, so we were working with population growth or something like that. I can put a couple different population growth curves up there and say, okay, if you see these graphs, what does it make you think about? And then it almost becomes a notice and wonder kind of thing. And then it's much easier for them to start sharing those ideas. So that's step one. The step two is let them talk in small groups first before sharing out on their own. And if you do those two things, you're going to get some good conversations going.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Dina.
Okay, so I think a lot of us had similar questions about the grading, or in our heads are thinking how this is going to go, and also time.
Sure.
So a couple questions, trying to focus it. First, for a teacher who might, let's say, be expert at using ADI, how many times a semester do you think they very thoroughly, deeply go into this process versus more shallowly?
Yeah, like bits and pieces of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So here, I'm asked that question all the time. So like it once again really depends on what works for you in teaching in your context, right? So what I usually recommend is you don't want to do it so rarely that you're reteaching the whole process every time, right? Like you get to do the dumpster fire over and over and over again. That's not so hot. So what I usually recommend is probably, if you're going to try this, do at least one a quarter, right? Is probably your lowest number.
That's what was in my head too, but then also like I could still do like the idea, come up with a kind of a plan. Maybe we're not going to actually go analyze data, but we can have a thought experiment about something.
Yeah.
And it's still keeping the practice. And then the other thing, I liked his idea of having a spreadsheet, and I know Devin, like thinking of, I also want to hold them accountable during the process, in the sense of, are we actually doing the thing and walking around the room? And maybe I break it into, like, I'm going to hold you accountable for, like, say, the plan and ideas, right? Like the task, the ideas, and the plan, like that, chunking that. Maybe that's a Monday, Tuesday thing. And it's not as much as like the whole report would be worth, but it's, I don't know, let's say the report is worth 100. This is worth 25 or 20. But it's like making sure that, like, checking in, because I know the kids who might try to wait till the end or never show evidence, and then they'll try to do it all at the last minute. And then I also like in the peer review, or even the sharing, that being its own little checkpoint for the process. Because, like, have we actually done the data? Have we actually been looking at analyzing the data? Are we asking? Because we're, like, from what I'm getting from this, we're asking them questions, right? So it's kind of a, it's an assessment, but and I'm checking it off, but it's not, it's kind of a completion grade, but I'm still holding them accountable by going around and giving them feedback. And then the peer review, to me, that's definitely a grade in itself, because of how much effort how much feedback I want them to give their peers. Right.
And
like
there's a little piece on the peer review guide where they can say, was this feedback helpful or not too? That's a nice little piece to have.
And I'd already downloaded those peer review thing. I found those on the website earlier today. Perfect. And I was like, oh, this is nice, because then this is something that structures it for them as giving feedback, but also it helps me as a rubric. Did you do this? Did you follow the instructions? Did you give them constructive feedback? And I can hold them accountable for that, because you got to hold them accountable, I would think, at almost every step of the process. And for some kids, the only way they'll be held accountable, not all kids, but for some kids, it's got to have a grade attached to it.
No, I
of
get
some
that.
sort.
Yeah. Oh, I hear you on that part, right? So the other one too, what I always find is interesting is like you're saying, like there's a lot of kids that have everything to grades, or they are used to not having to write things down until like the last second. And in some ways that happens because they've gotten away with it for so long, right? So may not necessarily your class, but they go to lots of other classes where, oh, I don't have to write anything down, right? So they bring that to yours. And what I found, that's the nice thing about actually the report, is if they write things down, the report's a breeze for them. If they don't, it's almost impossible to do. And they remember that experience of like, oh crap, I can't do this unless I take good notes and I keep records of what I'm doing and all of those kinds of things. So in some ways, the hot dumpster fire is almost a lesson of these here are things are here to help
For a
you.
reason.
They're here
I
for a
was-
reason to help you, so you don't. Yeah, take
People
advantage
could
of
also
it.
do like an exit ticket, like if you
Yep,
use an
extra tickets are
LMS,
great. Yep.
they could do a like an exit,
Yep.
like a survey or something, like what did you accomplish today? You know, even
Yes.
just like something,
Yep.
you know, because it's not high stakes, but it's also like we're not waiting to the last minute. And as you said, they'll crash and burn at the end if they, and you know, hopefully learn to not do that. But
Yeah.
sometimes
Yeah.
you have to learn the hard way too.
Yeah, I mean, and that's yeah. There's nothing like making a big mistake to learn from it, kind of thing. So yeah, we just the hard part is always like, how do you make sure that does that without making a permanent like damage to their grade? Like they learn the lesson without it biting them forever, kind of thing. So yeah, no, this is why teaching is so hard. Like, how do we work with all of these unique individuals and how they're thinking about stuff, right? And lots of the things I'm sharing are like rules of thumb, right? They're not a cure all. There's no magic fix for everything. It just increases the likelihood of things happening. Sound good? All right, talk to Jessica. Charlene, what do you got?
Oh, I'm actually taking notes on everything everybody's saying, but one of the things that I wrote down is just something that definitely needs to be addressed is just that that the modeling and making sure that the students know what the expectations are and making sure you're establishing those expectations at the beginning. But all of these questions about the timeline and the grading and everything are great points. I'm just taking down notes.
And let me give you everybody a piece of advice when it comes to time, right? So what I have found, so by and large, as all of us are teachers, we worry about our students a lot, right? And we want them to make sure that they're successful and doing well. And what I've seen happen quite a bit is that when students first start this process of doing an ADI investigation, they struggle, right? We've talked about the dumpster fire already. But there's a tendency to want to spend a lot more time on each of those stages to get them perfect the first time. And I've seen people go to multiple weeks on an investigation because they spent 3 days on the idea stage, right? And because they wanted to make sure everybody got the exact same, like all the ideas down, and we did a close read. Like you've got to keep to the track. So when I say get that done in half a period, you got to get that done in a half a period, right? Or it's going to stretch out and you're going to look at this thing and say, oh, I've just spent 2.5 weeks on this. That's too much time, right? The point of everything is in here is we've built all of these stages in as catches. So if anything downstream, so to speak, right? So anything that they've done before, they're going to revisit again as you keep moving on. It does not need to be perfect. They don't have to have the perfect ideas down. They don't have to have every idea from the idea stage memorized because they're going to be writing about it later. They're going to be using it in their argument boards. By having it go in different stages, it increases in modalities, increases the likelihood of them internalizing and remembering it, right? So yeah, just my warning to everybody is be careful on the time. Like I know you're it's super tempting to be able to say they're struggling, I want to help. Like it's okay they don't finish, right? Or the first time, or it's not perfect. What we're striving for is not this lesson. By the end of the year, they can engage in these practices, that they know the content inside and out, not just today. It's by the end of the year, right? We're trying to move them forward on these things. And when it comes to, like these cross-cutting concepts and practices, we have to practice a lot. That's why I was saying you have to do this more than like twice, right? Like it takes time to get better. So you've got to make sure you're not spending weeks and weeks and weeks on this. Like you should be able to get this through this in 5 days, right? And set a timer. We get moving and that kind of stuff, knowing that there's stuff built in to catch them if they're not getting it at that moment. That work? All right, got Dina, Sandra, we were talked, Charlene. I think that's everybody. Did I miss anybody? We're all good? All right. Fantastic discussion, everybody. This was really helpful. So we've got a few minutes left, so I wanted to just show you some resources as you get started. So what I've been trying to do is build out materials for a while that everybody can use. So if you go to the Argument-Driven Inquiry website, there's a little icon that says shop. If you teach in Texas, we have a book that's aligned to the TEKS for every course, or most every course in the science thing. So there's up from kindergarten to physics or IPC. There's a book that has 8 of these investigations. So inside the book there is a front matter that explains everything that I just went through here with you in the webinar in written form. It also includes like advice about assessment and making modifications for students, all of these pieces. Then each investigation, they're set up as handouts that you can print, or not print, but photocopy, and a teacher notes that tells you the number of times, what's the learning objectives for each task, or each stage, all of that kind of stuff that's all in there, designed to make it as easy as you possibly can to get going. So we've got Texas versions of that. If you're an NGSS state, we've got NGSS versions of that. So there's like Earth Space Science for 9 and 12, Earth Space Science for middle school. All of those are in there, all aligned with those. When you get a book, we also built this, we built what we call the Learning Hub. So if you go to this website, ADI Learning Hub right there, you can sign up for a free account in this. So you just sign up now, use any email you want. And if you've got a book, on the back of the book, there comes a book code. And when you sign up for your account, you enter your book code, then your book shows up in your library. So this is my library here. Those are 4 book codes I put in. So I can go to any one of these now and hit the view button. And when I get there, I'll see a card for each one of the investigations in my book. And so there's a bunch of buttons on there. So there's a handout button. So you can download all of the handouts if you don't want to photocopy them out of the book, right? So you can download them in color, and you can download those that way. So you get a nice clean copy of that. There's a tab for standards. You can check the standards. There's a materials tab for those you need. If it's an investigation that has like cards or something like that, we've got cutoutable versions of that in there with the handouts that you can download as well, so you can get started on that investigation. But probably the most useful thing you've got there is what's called the presentation mode. If you click on that, it basically gives you the slide deck for the investigation. So like when I showed you the video and all the text, it has a presentation mode that comes up, and then you can just play the videos right there and show the pictures in color, and you can click on those and make them bigger, and you can guide students through that, so you don't have to make that like PowerPoint to kind of talk them through. You just boot that up, and all of this, that's totally for you forever, as long as you want it, kind of thing. Also, if you want kits, so like if there's cards, we make them in color and stiff, so they're reusable. If you like an investigation a lot and plan on using it for a number of years, you can get a different set of cards that are not just kind of the black and white you have to copy. Also, we've got kits for every single one of those investigations. They're usually made with stuff that you can find in your lab, right? So there's almost never something specific that you can't find someplace else, but often it's just easier to, if you're doing school planning, you can just get the kits for those and you get a bundle for an entire book, or you can buy individual kits, however you want to do it. But that's at the shop store too, if you need any of those materials. Also, that's at the store, there's also a thing that says classroom supplies. So we've also got things like posters for you. We've got these dry erase pads that are not pads, but kind of like, they look like placemats, but they're flexible. You can use them as dry erase boards. You can get those. There's lanyards, they're colored lanyards that you can use for numbering students, like 1 through 4, and orange team, that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of supplies in there, and that basically has come from doing these webinars for a while and folks saying, hey, it would be really nice if we had this. So we built it for you. So that's all there. Ideally, I'd love to give you all this for free, but there's like it costs money to put these things together. So those are in there, but if you need them, they're there. So yeah, I encourage you to go check those things out. Hopefully that's helpful. If not, look online. There's usually some kinds of investigations there, or you can make your own, however you want to do it. Really, I'm here to help out in any way I can to make this as easy as possible for you to do this. So with that, I'd love to hear your biggest takeaways from this session. Well, not the session, but from the whole webinar series, right? So we've done these 3 days together. I'd love to hear what's your biggest takeaway from all this. Do you feel like this is going to help you with your goals? Is there anything, like, what's your tidbit that I always think if you go into something, you should leave with something, right? Of what was your big learning thing? So I'll give you a few seconds, not a few minutes, a few seconds to kind of think that over, and then I'm going to go down the line again. I just would love to hear your big takeaway, not necessarily from this session, but from the entire 3 session series. All right, I'm going to put you on the spot here, Sandra, because you're the first one next to the window of my face here. Big takeaways from the series.
I think with fostering discussion, create a need to talk, introduce uncertainty. So if I create that need to talk, maybe there will not be so much silence.
I love it. It really helps a lot, right? Of just something that's not it has information missing. It gives you a reason. It really helps a lot. Love it. Charlie, what'd you say? Or what's your biggest takeaway?
My biggest takeaway is, well, I think probably my favorite part of all this is the your scaffolding for the CER or the CEJ for you guys. I really think that getting our kids to develop that writing and the way this is all connected will improve that ability in all of our students. So I think that's my favorite part of this. So that's kind of my point of view. So
awesome, love it. Dina, what's your big takeaway?
I do bits and probably all of us do bits and pieces of this, and I use my case studies, but it's knowing and accepting that it's probably going to be an adjustment period, but knowing that I have resources that I want to adjust them. It doesn't mean I don't want to look at others. It's what am I already familiar with? Because this routine, like in these stages, is not unfamiliar, but is also unfamiliar, right? Like implementing it in the classroom and all these things. It's like, to my mind, it seems best for myself to use something that I'm already familiar with conceptually, right? So not everything's reinventing the wheel.
Love it.
And just FYI, like on your website, you probably already, I'm sure you know this, there's an Excel spreadsheet, which I shared with my team, that aligns your books and like the national book with the NGSS standards. And it does it by the grades. It was there for downloading.
Yeah.
I stumbled. Yeah. So that's super useful in my thought, like in that spreadsheet. So I don't know if that's something that you've already sent in an email and I just missed it, or
Probably not. I don't remember sometimes I don't remember what we put out
do
there,
you
to
want,
be honest.
I can go to my mail and put it in the message
That would be
thing.
wonderful. Would you do
Okay.
that while we're
Yeah.
talking about this things? That's super helpful for everybody. Thank you. Let's see. Devon, what's your big takeaway?
I've really been looking for ways to put more phenomena-based teaching in my classroom, and I really like what this will do for me.
Oh, awesome. I'm glad that's helpful for you. How about Jessica?
I'm really excited to try the parts that I've already seen, and hoping that I'll actually be able to get the video for session 2 so that I can figure out the middle part.
Cool. I'm gonna have my email at the end of this. If you get any step, just send me an email and I will find a way to make sure you see that. Like we all have these technology problems of people build stuff for us to use and it's sometimes really hard to use them. So you will have those, I promise. Courtney, what about you?
I got a lot of new ideas and I started thinking more of like how I could realistically implement it in my class. I definitely want to dig around the website more and I want to dig around like I want to see that Excel sheet too. I want to try a different one, I think this time. Last time we tried the Dead Sea. I think that
Oh,
was
okay,
one
yeah.
for high school. Yeah, we've done that one. I would think I would like to try a different one, see how that kind of compares now that I have more ideas going on.
Awesome. Love it. Thanks, Dina, for putting that in the chat. There's the link for the standards if you know. Sean, what are you thinking? Big takeaways.
Yeah. Well, I'm new to ADI, so up until this point, I've just kind of been seeing it in terms of like the materials that go with all the labs or the the explorations, inquiries. So now my perception has shifted to, oh, this is it's a writing approach for science, right? Getting the students using the SEPs and science and engineering practices and writing in science. So I like that. I mean, you could use this routine or approach really with like anything that you do, any of your explorations or inquiries. And it's just kind of reinvigorating to think about getting students writing again, in science.
Awesome. Love it. And Jeff, you're up.
Okay, I'm here. Sorry, just the hitting the button on time,
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah. I do like the idea again from this one. I'm really taking the peer review method as a big thing to get them to write and write effectively. Not just write, but write effectively and actually be able to express their thoughts, because that way as those cross-cutting concepts go, they can become better at expressing the overall thought and being more analytical and critical in their thinking.
Love it. Yeah, I can't emphasize, like, I teach at the University of Texas at Austin, right? And I can't tell you how much people want people in the STEM fields want people that can write. Like in some ways, when we talk about like college and career readiness, the best gift we can give our students, I think, is the ability to write. Right. And yeah, it's that everyone's asking for it because that's how, like, they have the publications is how they get tenure. The grant applications is how they fund everything. So it's this constant, can you help me write stuff? So I think if we can do more of that in schools, we're really setting up our students for future success, kind of thing. So thank you for that. All right.
Welcome.
Wow, look at this. I'm on time again. I really want to thank, this has been a really fun 3 weeks. I've really enjoyed. Thank you for being so active on these sessions, asking questions. chewing on stuff. It's been great. So thank you so much. I hope this was really helpful for you. Please jot down my email. It's just victor@argumentdriveninquiry.com. Shoot me an email if you need anything. Ideas, confused about something, can't find things, want me to look over something you've modified for feedback. I'm here to help. Just let me know. Shoot me an email. I will do my best to answer it as fast as I can. Sound good?
Thanks, Victor.
All right. Thanks, everybody. And
Thank
that
you.
concludes it. And that concludes it. Have a great weekend, everyone. All right.
You too.
Thank you.
You're welcome.